then all of a sudden it's a company and people think, oh, they're an overnight success. X doesn't happen overnight. That shift from 1x to 10x can look more like a compound curve. Who has a business understands exactly what I'm talking about there. So that's just some perspective on 10x. Now I started talking about the compounding. In Good to Great, and I really liked the way he did his research. He had written a book, Built to Last. Then there was a real push to say, well, wait a minute, how do I become a Built to Last company? He took great companies, first from Built to Last, then he made a new definition of what a great company is. Then the team, it wasn't Jim by himself, it was his team. They looked at when did the company become great. So he went back and looked at an inflection point. So obviously, if he's looking at 10 great companies as of today, they all have a different inflection point. And that inflection point being where I showed that going along and then it starts to go up. And that point right there where it starts to go up in that compounding curve, that would be the inflection point. Then what he did was he looked at comparison companies. He looked at other companies that had very similar markets, very similar products, lots of similarities. He then looked at the differences between the good to great companies, the ones that made the 10x, and compared them to the companies that did not. And that's what we're going to talk about here. He found a great company based on their criteria, and they had a very specific criteria. And Jim Collins, he embodies this idea of if you disagree with me, then I disagree with me until we figure out who's missing information. There were no sacred cows. I mean, everything was on trial for its life in terms of ideas or thoughts until they unfolded it all. Once it unfolded and they were able to lock it in, but they were surprised. It wasn't always what they thought it would be. So you have the good to great, you have the two or three companies that he called comparison companies. And then he looked at the good to great company, and I'm going to draw this as a line like that, but understand what I'm saying is that it's more like that. And then he made sure that the comparison companies continued on. And then they identified the things that were present with the inflection company. So these companies that made this inflection point, by definition, they were anomalies. They were standalone. And they happened at different times. So it wasn't necessarily the environment that did it. They took steps to rule it out. So it wasn't because the market took off or because computers happened or the internet or whatever like that. They made sure that they took that out. In his book, Good to Great, and he has a lot of principles that he introduces, but for this, I'm only going to talk about three. The flywheel, and imagine a 6,000-pound flywheel, and you have a team of people, and the first time you turn that flywheel, it may not move at all. You may only move it an inch or two, but if you come back, you've got a little bit more muscle, you got some better ideas about how to move it. Next day you can move it and it moves 3 inches, but then it stops. Then you get to more guys, and now you can move it 5 inches. When you come back, it's still moving. Now, it's already, you got 2 inches ahead. And now you have those same strategies and you move it again. And that 2 inches, you have the 3 inches. So it's not just 5 inches that it's moving this time. It may move 8 or 10 inches. And you get the idea. And every day you come back and you move that flywheel. And that's why it looks like this. That's how you can see that compounding curve. The second thing he talked about was level 5 leadership.